The Hunchback's gyros whined as Lieutenant Marcus Chen edged his 45-ton war machine around the corner of what had once been a residential tower. Pulverized concrete crunched beneath the mech's feet, grinding against twisted rebar and the compressed remnants of civilian vehicles. Through his viewport, the city of New Samarkand stretched before him like a mouthful of broken teeth. 30 square kilometers of shattered architecture and smoke-stained sky. The Capellum Confederation had held this world for 3 months. The Federated Suns wanted it back. Marcus and his lance were the tip of that particular spear, probing into the city's eastern quarter, while the main assault force gathered strength 20 clicks to the south. His job was simple in theory. Find the enemy, identify their strength, survive long enough to report it. The massive Tomodzuru autocannon mounted on his mech's right shoulder shifted slightly as he adjusted his stance. The weapon was a monster. An Armstrong J-11 Autocannon 20 that could punch through the frontal armor of any mech in existence at close range. It was also loud enough to wake the dead, which made stealth a relative concept when you pulled the trigger. Anvil 2. Anything on thermals. Marcus kept his voice low, though the enemy would need sophisticated listening equipment to pick up his transmissions through the interference caused by all the burning infrastructure. Negative. Anvil lead. That was Corporal Sarah Kim and her Centurion, positioned 2 blocks north. I've got heat signatures, but they're all building fires or broken reactors. Nothing moving. Marcus checked his own sensors. The tactical display was a mess of false positives and dead zones. The city's ruins created a sensor environment worse than any jungle. Ferrocrete and steel played hell with magnetic anomaly detectors. Burning promethium from ruptured fuel lines masked thermal signatures. And the sheer vertical complexity of the urban terrain meant his mech's targeting computer was constantly recalculating firing solutions for targets that might be 5 stories above or below his current position. He advanced another 50 meters, keeping the Hunchback close to the buildings. The mech's hunched forward posture and the massive autocannon gave it an aggressive, predatory silhouette. Marcus had learned to use that. Enemy pilots saw the AC-20 and made decisions based on fear rather than tactics. They backed away when they should have closed, or they rushed when they should have been patient. The weapon was psychological warfare before it ever fired a shot. A flicker of movement caught his attention. Marcus froze, letting the Hunchback's momentum bleed away as he focused on the collapsed overpass 300 meters ahead. His targeting reticle drifted across the debris field, painting red squares on anything that might be a threat. Nothing, just shadows and smoke. He was about to move forward when his threat receiver chirped. Someone had painted him with a targeting laser, just for a second, from somewhere above. And to his right, Marcus reacted on instinct, throwing the Hunchback into a sprint toward the nearest intact structure. His mech's top speed wasn't impressive, but the burst of acceleration was enough. A flight of long-range missiles streaked through the space where he'd been standing, detonating against the building behind him in a cascade of fire and shrapnel. Contact. Anvil 2. I've got an LRM carrier probably on a rooftop. Grid reference 47 Delta. Marcus slammed his mech against the side of an office complex, using the building itself as cover. More missiles arced overhead, walking across the street in a pattern that suggested the enemy had lost his exact position. I don't have line of sight. Lead. These buildings are blocking everything. Kim sounded frustrated, and Marcus didn't blame her. Urban combat was a three-dimensional nightmare. Stay put. I'll flush them out. Marcus studied his tactical display, plotting angles and distances. The missile carrier was somewhere above him, probably on one of the taller structures that still had an intact roof. That gave the enemy range and elevation, but it also limited their mobility. Missile carriers were support vehicles, lightly armored and dependent on their long reach to stay alive. Marcus began moving again, but this time he went through the building rather than around it. The Hunchback's shoulder crunched through an already damaged wall, and suddenly he was inside what had been a commercial space, pushing through cubicle dividers and collapsed ceiling tiles. His mech's head scraped against the second floor, dislodging a waterfall of debris. The building groaned around him, structural supports complaining about the 45 tons of metal walking through their carefully calculated load paths. He emerged on the far side of the block, his sensors immediately picking up the missile carrier's heat signature. The vehicle was exactly where he'd calculated, perched on top of a parking garage 4 stories up. The crew had good discipline. They'd gone quiet after losing their target, waiting for him to expose himself again. Marcus smiled inside his neuro helmet. The AC. 2-0's range was theoretically 360 meters. In practice, it was devastating at half that distance, and absolutely apocalyptic at point-blank range. He was currently 100 meters from the parking garage's ground floor. Anvil 2 on my mark. Light up the sky with everything you've got. I don't care if you hit anything. Just make noise. Copy that, lead. Ready when you are. Marcus counted down from 3, then triggered the comm. Mark. The distant boom of Kim's Centurion autocannon echoed through the streets, followed by the characteristic shriek of her laser cutting through the smoke-filled air. The missile carrier's crew reacted exactly as Marcus had hoped, turning their attention toward the new threat and ripple-firing their remaining missiles in Kim's general direction. Marcus stepped out from behind the building and aimed upward. The targeting reticle settled over the parking garage's 4th floor, painting the missile carrier an angry red. His thumb found the firing stud for the AC. 2-0. The Tamazuro autocannon spoke with a voice like the end of the world. The recoil shuddered through the Hunchback's frame, transmitted through the mech structure into Marcus's command couch despite the shock absorbers and gyro compensators. The 200mm shell crossed the distance in a fraction of a second and struck the parking garage's support column dead center. Faro Creek exploded. The column disintegrated, and the entire 4th floor dropped 3 meters before catching on twisted rebar. The missile carrier slid sideways, its crew probably screaming as their vehicle tilted toward oblivion. Marcus fired again, and this time the shell punched through the garage's floor, detonating somewhere in the structure's guts. The building shuddered, swayed, and then collapsed in on itself with a roar that drowned out every other sound in the district. When the dust cleared, the parking garage was a pile of rubble, and the missile carrier was silent. Anvil 2, threat neutralized. Reform on my position. Good shooting, lead. I'm moving now. Marcus checked his ammunition counter. The AC-20 had a notoriously limited ammunition supply. Each ton of shells gave him only 5 shots, and his mech carried 3 tons, 15 rounds total. He'd just used 2, leaving him with 13. In a protracted engagement, that would evaporate quickly. Every shot had to count. He moved deeper into the city, following a boulevard that had once been a main thoroughfare. Burned-out vehicles lined the sides, pushed there by previous fighting or by civilian evacuations that had gone wrong. The buildings on either side were a mix of intact, damaged, and completely destroyed, creating a canyon of uncertain stability. Marcus kept his sensors on maximum gain, sweeping constantly for any sign of the enemy. The Capellan forces on New Samarkand were reportedly a reinforced battalion built around a core of veteran mech warriors, supported by armor and infantry. Intelligence suggested they were preparing a counteroffensive, which was why Marcus's recon lance had been sent in. Find the enemy's staging area, identify their strength, and get out alive to report it. Simple. Except nothing was simple when you were walking through a city that wanted to kill you as much as the enemy did. Lead. I'm picking up vibrations through the ground. Something heavy, moving parallel to us about 3 blocks west. Kim's Centurion had better seismic sensors than the Hunchback, a quirk of its design that made it useful for detecting hidden threats. Can you get a count? Feels like 2, maybe 3 contacts. Definitely mech scale. Marcus processed that information. 3 mechs meant at least a lance, possibly more if they were screening for a larger force. The smart move would be to back off, report the contact, and let someone else deal with it. But Marcus needed more information. Mech types, unit markings, anything that would help Command understand what they were facing. Anvil 2, hold position and keep tracking them. I'm going to get eyes on. Lead that's awful close to a knife fight for comfort. That's why I brought the biggest knife. Marcus turned his Hunchback west, picking his way through the rubble toward the enemy's position. The AC-20 shifted on its mount, the weapon's targeting system already calculating firing solutions based on his projected path. The vibrations grew stronger as he approached. Marcus could feel them through his command couch, a rhythmic thumping that meant heavy mechs, probably in the 50 to 60 ton range. He slowed his advance, using every piece of cover available. Hunchback's armor was decent for its weight class, concentrated heavily on the front torso to protect the massive autocannon, but it wouldn't stand up to focused fire from multiple opponents. He reached an intersection and paused, using his mech's sensors to paint the area ahead. The tactical display updated, showing 3 contacts moving in formation down a parallel street. Marcus adjusted his position, getting a better angle, and suddenly his visual display resolved the contacts into actual mechs. 2 Vindicators and a Cataphract, all Capellan designs, all carrying a mix of PPCs and lasers that would turn his Hunchback into slag if they caught him in the open. The Cataphract in particular was bad news. A 70-ton heavy mech with enough armor to shrug off anything except sustained fire or a very lucky shot. Marcus studied their movement pattern. They were sweeping through the district in a standard search formation, checking buildings and maintaining mutual support. Professional work, which meant experienced pilots. He recorded everything his sensors could capture, storing the data for later transmission. As he watched, the cataphract stopped and turned its torso toward a collapsed department store. The mech's right arm came up, and a PPC discharged with a crackling whine. The particle beam slashed through the building's facade, melting ferrocrete and steel. Whatever the pilot thought he'd seen, he was making sure it wouldn't threaten him. That gave Marcus an idea. It was risky, potentially suicidal, but it would give him the information he needed, and possibly even the odds in this sector. He began backing away from the intersection, moving as quietly as a 45-ton mech could move. When he was 2 blocks away, he opened a comm channel. "Anvil 2, I need you to make some noise again. Same drill as before, lots of fire, no specific target. Make them think you're lost and scared." There was a pause. "Lead. If I light up, those 3 contacts are going to come straight for me. That's the idea. I'll be waiting for them." Another pause. Longer this time. Then Kim's voice came back, steady despite what he was asking her to do. "You better not get me killed, Marcus. Wouldn't dream of it, Sarah." On my mark. Marcus positioned his Hunchback in the ground floor of a hotel, whose upper stories had been sheared off by artillery fire. The building's interior was a maze of collapsed walls and hanging debris, but it gave him a clear view of the street outside, while keeping his mech mostly hidden. He checked his ammunition counter again. 13 rounds. Unlucky number. He'd need to make them count. Mark. The sound of Kim's Centurion firing echoed through the district, deliberately ragged and undisciplined. She was selling the image of a scared pilot firing at shadows. Marcus watched his sensors, waiting for the Capellan lance to react. They didn't disappoint. The 3 mechs changed course immediately, moving toward the sound of combat with the coordinated precision of experienced warriors. The 2 Vindicators took point, their PPCs charged and ready, while the cataphract hung back slightly, using its heavier armor to anchor the formation. Marcus let them pass his position. He counted to 3, then stepped out of the hotel directly behind the trailing Vindicator. The range was less than 50 meters, point blank for an AC-20. He fired. The Tomodzuro roared, and the Vindicator's back exploded. The shell punched through the mech's rear armor like it was paper, detonating inside the torso cavity. Marcus saw the Vindicator stagger, smoke pouring from the wound, but the mech didn't fall. Tough pilot, or good damage control. Either way, Marcus didn't give him a chance to recover. He fired again, and the second shell finished what the first had started. The Vindicator collapsed forward, crashing into the street in a shower of sparks. The other 2 Capellan mechs spun around, their pilots probably screaming warnings to each other. Marcus was already moving, charging forward into the teeth of their response. The cataphract's PPC lit up the street, the particle beam passing close enough to his cockpit that Marcus felt the heat through his viewport. He juked left, putting a burned-out truck between himself and the heavy mech, then cut right as the remaining Vindicator tried to bracket him with its medium laser. The laser scored his right torso, burning through armor plate and making his damage display light up with angry orange indicators. Marcus ignored it, focused entirely on closing the distance. The AC-20 was king at close range, but it needed that close range to be effective. At 150 meters, a PPC or laser could chip away at him all day. At 30 meters, his autocannon could end the fight with a single shot. He crashed through a storefront, using the building as momentary cover while he repositioned. The cataphract fired again, its PPC blowing a hole through the wall Marcus had just vacated. Ferrocrete rained down on his mech's head, and somewhere above him, the building groaned ominously. Marcus emerged on the cataphract's flank and fired. The shell struck the heavy mech's left leg, blowing away armor and exposing the myoma bundles beneath. The cataphract stumbled but didn't fall, its pilot fighting to keep the 70-ton machine upright. Marcus didn't have time for a follow-up shot, because the Vindicator had found him again, its PPC tracking across the battlefield toward his position. Anvil 2. Now would be a great time for some help. Marcus threw his Hunchback into a sprint, such as it was, moving away from the Vindicator's line of fire. The PCP bolt crackled past him, close enough that his sensors registered the electromagnetic pulse. On my way, led 20 seconds. 20 seconds was a lifetime in mech combat. Marcus cut left around a corner, found himself in a narrow alley between two buildings, and realized his mistake immediately. The alley was too narrow for his Hunchback to turn around. He was trapped. The cataphract appeared at the alley's entrance, blocking the light. Its pilot had him dead to rights, and they both knew it. The heavy mech's PPC began cycling up, the weapon's capacitors whining as they charged for the kill shot. Marcus did the only thing he could. He fired the AC-20 straight down the alley, aiming not at the cataphract, but at the building beside it. The shell struck the structure's corner support, and 2,000 kilograms of ferrocrete and steel came crashing down. The cataphract's pilot had a split second to react, backing away as the building collapsed across the alley mouth, filling the space with debris and dust. Marcus didn't wait to see if the avalanche had caught the heavy mech. He activated his jump jets, the Hunchback's limited flight capability barely enough to lift the mech's bulk. He rose 5 meters, 10, his jets screaming in protest, and crashed down on top of a single-story shop on the alley's far side. The roof collapsed beneath him, but he was through, tumbling into the street beyond in a barely controlled fall. Kim's Centurion was there, its autocannon barking as it engaged the Vindicator. The Capellan mech was already damaged, armor scarred by multiple hits, and Kim's latest burst walked up its center torso. The Vindicator returned fire, but the shot went wide, the pilot's aim thrown off by the damage his mech had sustained. Marcus regained his footing and added his AC-20 to the fight. The range was longer than he liked, nearly 100 meters, but the Vindicator was stationary and focused on Kim. The shell caught it in the right torso, penetrating deep into the mech's structure. Something critical gave way inside, and the Vindicator's right arm fell off, severed by internal damage. The mech took a step back, then another, its pilot clearly reassessing the tactical situation. The decision was made for him, when the cataphract emerged from the dust cloud, damaged but still combat effective. The heavy mech's pilot took in the situation at a glance. 2 enemies, one of his lancemates down, the other crippled. He made the smart call. Fall back to rally point Beta. The transmission was unencrypted, probably deliberately so, a warning to any other Capellan forces in the area. The Vindicator needed no further encouragement. It turned and ran, its remaining arm hanging useless at its side. The cataphract covered its retreat, firing its PCP in Marcus's general direction more to discourage pursuit than with any real hope of hitting. Marcus let them go. He'd accomplished his mission, confirmed enemy presence, identified unit types, and survived to report it. Pushing his luck further would just get him killed. Anvil 2. Status report. I'm intact, lead. Some armor damage, but nothing critical. That was way too close. Agreed. Let's pull back and transmit our data. Command needs to know what we're facing. They withdrew through the city, moving carefully and watching for signs of pursuit. The Capellan forces didn't follow, probably regrouping and calling for reinforcements. Marcus used the time to review the engagement, analyzing what had worked and what hadn't. The ambush had been effective, but he'd nearly gotten himself killed in that alley. Urban combat rewarded aggression, but it punished overconfidence even more harshly. They reached the extraction point an hour later, a relatively intact plaza on the city's eastern edge, where a VTOL could land without too much risk. Marcus transmitted his data burst to headquarters, a compressed packet containing everything his sensors had recorded. The response came back within minutes. Hold position, await further orders. Marcus settled his Hunchback into a defensive position and waited. Around him, the city burned quietly, smoke rising from 1,000 small fires. New Samarkand had been a prosperous world once, home to 3 million people and a thriving industrial base. Now it was a wasteland, fought over by armies that cared more about strategic value than human cost. Lead, you think we'll take this place back? Kim's question was quiet, almost philosophical. Marcus considered his answer. We'll take it back. Whether there's anything left worth taking, that's another question. The comm crackled before Kim could respond. Anvil Lance, this is Hammer Actual. New orders. Enemy forces are massing for a counterattack in your sector. You are to delay and harass until reinforcements arrive. Time on target, 90 minutes. Acknowledge. Marcus felt his stomach sink. 90 minutes was a long time to hold off an enemy counterattack with just 2 mechs. But orders were orders. Hammer, actual. Anvil lead acknowledges. We'll hold as long as we can. Understood, Anvil. Hammer out. Kim's Centurion shifted its weight, the mech's posture somehow conveying resignation, despite being a 40-ton war machine. Well, at least we won't be bored. Marcus checked his ammunition counter one more time. 9 rounds left in the AC. 2-0. He'd need to make every single one count. Let's find some good defensive positions. If they want this sector, they're going to pay for it. They moved back into the city, looking for terrain that would favor their smaller force. Marcus found what he needed 3 blocks in, a commercial district where the buildings formed a natural choke point, forcing any attack to come down a single main street. The side streets were blocked by rubble or too narrow for mech passage. It was a killing ground, assuming they could hold it. Anvil 2, take up position on that office building's 3rd floor. You'll have a clear field of fire down the main approach. Marcus indicated the structure on his tactical display, a relatively intact high-rise with good sight lines. I'll be at ground level. When they come, let them get close before you open up. I want them bunched up and focused on me. You're using yourself as bait again. It's what I'm good at. Kim's Centurion climbed into position, using its hands to pull itself up the building's exterior. The structure groaned under the mech's weight, but held. Marcus positioned his Hunchback behind the burned-out husk of a ground transport, the vehicle's bulk providing some cover while still allowing him clear shots down the street. Then they waited. The Capellan forces announced their arrival with artillery. Shells began falling on the district, heavy ordnance that turned buildings into rubble and filled the air with smoke and dust. Marcus hunched inside his cockpit, feeling each impact through his mech's frame. The enemy was softening them up, trying to force them out of position before the main assault. Marcus held his ground. The artillery barrage was terrifying, but it was also imprecise. The enemy couldn't risk destroying the entire district. They needed the infrastructure intact if they were going to hold the sector. The bombardment was more psychological than destructive, meant to shake his nerve. It was working, but Marcus didn't let that stop him. The artillery lifted after 10 minutes, and Marcus's sensors immediately picked up multiple contacts approaching. 6 mechs, moving in 2 lances of 3 each. He recognized the signatures. More Vindicators, a pair of Centurions, and what looked like a trebuchet and a catapult. Both missile boats designed to saturate an area with long-range fire. Anvil 2, I count 6 contacts. This is going to get interesting. That's one word for it. I'm tracking them. Missile carriers are hanging back, trying to use their range advantage. Marcus watched the enemy advance. They were being cautious, using buildings for cover and advancing by bounds. Good tactics, which meant he'd need to be better. The AC-20 gave him an advantage in close combat, but 6-2 odds meant he couldn't afford to trade shots. He needed to break their formation, make them panic. The lead Vindicator reached the kill zone, stepping into the main street with its PPC sweeping for targets. Marcus let it come, waiting until 2 more mechs had followed it into the open. Then he triggered his AC-20. The Tamozuru's roar echoed through the district. The shell caught the Vindicator in the center torso, punching through armor and destroying something vital. The mech staggered, tried to recover, and then collapsed as its gyro failed. The pilot ejected, the command couch rocketing skyward on a pillar of flame. Kim opened up from her elevated position, her autocannon, and laser raking the second mech in line. The Centurion took the hits on its left side, armor peeling away under the assault. It tried to return fire, But Kim had chosen her position well. The angle made it difficult for the enemy to get a clean shot. The Capellan formation dissolved into chaos. The remaining mechs scattered, looking for cover and trying to identify where the ambush was coming from. Marcus fired again, his shell missing the Centurion but striking the building behind it. The structure collapsed, burying the street in debris and separating the enemy lance from its support elements. Good shooting lead. They're breaking formation. Marcus wasn't celebrating yet. The two missile boats were still in play, and they just found his position. Dozens of missiles arced through the air, trailing smoke as they converged on his location. Marcus threw his Hunchback into motion, sprinting away from his previous position as the missiles impacted. The ground transport he'd been using for cover disappeared in a fireball, and the street behind him turned into a crater. He ducked into a building, crashing through its front entrance and using the structure for cover. His armor was holding, but barely. The damage display showed yellow and orange across his entire left side, and his heat levels were climbing from all the running he needed to end this quickly before the enemy could coordinate their fire. A shadow fell across his position. Marcus looked up and saw one of the enemy Centurions standing in the street, its autocannon pointed directly at his hiding spot. The pilot fired, and shells tore through the building's wall, stitching a line of destruction toward Marcus's position. Marcus didn't think. He simply reacted, charging forward through the disintegrating wall and closing with the enemy mech. The Centurion's pilot tried to back away, but Marcus was faster. He brought the AC-20 to bear at a range of less than 20 meters and fired. The shell entered through the Centurion's left torso and exited through its back, taking half the mech's internal structure with it. The Centurion toppled sideways, crashing into a building and bringing down another avalanche of debris. Marcus didn't stop moving, pushing deeper into the enemy formation before they could react. A PPC bolt seared past his cockpit, so close that his viewport polarized automatically to protect his vision. Marcus spun his torso, tracking the shot back to its source, the trebuchet, trying to bring its missiles to bear. He fired the AC-20 again, and the trebuchet's right arm disappeared in a spray of metal and Myanmar. The missile boat staggered but stayed upright, its pilot fighting for control. Lead, you've got the catapult moving to flank you. East side. Coming fast. Marcus checked his sensors and confirmed Kim's warning. The catapult was trying to get an angle on him, using the ruined buildings for cover. He had maybe 10 seconds before it reached firing position. His ammunition counter read 6 rounds, 6 chances to end this before the odds caught up with him. He ran toward the catapult's position, using speed and aggression to throw off the enemy's timing. The catapult emerged from behind a collapsed hotel, its missile racks loaded and ready. Marcus and the Capellan pilot saw each other at the same moment, both bringing their weapons to bear. Marcus fired first. The AC-20 shell hit the catapult's left torso, penetrating the missile bay and detonating the ammunition stored there. The catapult disappeared in a massive explosion, the ammo cook-off tearing the mech apart from the inside. Marcus felt the blast wave even through his cockpit, his Hunchback rocking on its feet from the concussion. When the smoke cleared, 3 Capellan mechs were down, and the survivors were retreating. The trebuchet limped away, trailing smoke and sparks. The remaining Vindicator provided cover, firing its PPC more to discourage pursuit than with any hope of hitting. Marcus let them go. He'd done enough. Anvil 2. Confirm enemy withdrawal. Confirmed, lead. They're pulling back toward the city center. We held them. Marcus checked his systems. His Hunchback was a mess. Armor breached in a dozen places. Heat sinks struggling to dissipate the thermal load from sustained combat. But the mech was still standing, still functional. 5 rounds left in the AC. 2-0. Enough for one more fight, if it came to that. It didn't. The reinforcements arrived 40 minutes later. A full company of mechs supported by armor and infantry. Marcus briefed the company commander on the tactical situation, uploaded his combat data, and finally allowed himself to power down his Hunchback's reactor. The silence in the cockpit was deafening after hours of combat noise. Marcus sat in his command couch, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. His hands were shaking, adrenaline crash hitting him all at once. He'd fought in a dozen engagements, but urban combat was different, more personal, more brutal. Every street corner could hide a threat. Every building could become a tomb. A tech crew arrived to assess his mech's damage. The lead technician, a grizzled veteran with prosthetic arms, whistled when he saw the Hunchback's condition. "Sir, you beat the hell out of this machine. Gonna take us at least 8 hours to patch her up. Will she fight again? Oh yeah. Armor's replaceable, and your internals are mostly intact. That AC, 2-0 is still in perfect working order, which is the important thing." The tech patted the massive autocannon affectionately. "This beauty saved your life today." Marcus climbed down from his mech, his legs almost giving out when he hit the ground. Kim was there, already out of her Centurion, looking as exhausted as he felt. They exchanged a look that said everything words couldn't. 90 minutes, Kim said finally. "We held for 90 minutes against 6 mechs. We did." Marcus looked back at his Hunchback, at the scorched armor and battle damage. The mech looked like it had been through a war, which it had. "Think they'll send us back in?" "Probably. That's what we signed up for." "Yeah." Marcus accepted a water bottle from one of the techs and drank deeply. The water was warm and tasted like plastic, but it was the best thing he'd ever experienced. Next time, though, I'm requesting air support. Kim laughed, the sound bordering on hysteria. Air support in a city this dense, they'd hit us as often as the enemy. Still better odds than 6-2. They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the relief force moved past them into the city. More mechs, more warriors, all heading into the concrete coffin that New Samarkand had become. Some of them would come back, some wouldn't. That was the nature of war, especially war fought in close quarters where every corner could hide death. Lieutenant Chen, a runner approached, saluting crisply. "Colonel wants to see you for debriefing, sir." Marcus returned the salute. "Tell him I'll be there in 5 minutes." He waited for the runner to leave, then turned back to Kim. "Get some rest. Something tells me this isn't over." It's never over. Kim headed toward the field hospital tent, where medics were checking pilots for injuries. Marcus watched her go, then looked back at the city one more time. Somewhere in those ruins, Capellan forces were regrouping, planning their next move. They'd lost this engagement, but the battle for New Samarkand was far from decided. There would be more fighting, more close-quarters combat in streets that were more grave than ground. More moments where Marcus would have to trust his skills, his mech, and that massive AC. 2-0 to see him through. He thought about the Vindicator pilot who'd ejected, rocketing away from his dying mech. That pilot would be picked up by his side, patched up, and put in another mech to fight again. Just like Marcus would climb back into his Hunchback, reload that Tomodzuro autocannon, and push back into the city's depths. Because that was the job. That was what being a mech warrior meant. The concrete coffin waited, patient and hungry. Marcus turned away from the city and headed for the command tent. There would be time enough to face those streets again. For now, he had a debriefing to attend and reports to file. The war went on, with or without him, and he intended to be there when it was decided. Behind him, technicians swarmed over his Hunchback, welding new armor plates and reloading ammunition. The mech would be ready to fight again soon, its wounds patched if not healed. Just like Marcus himself. Just like every warrior who'd survived the day's combat. In the distance, artillery rumbled. The battle for New Samarkand continued, street by street, building by building. And somewhere in that vast urban battlefield, Marcus knew he'd find himself again soon, piloting his Hunchback through narrow streets with that massive AC. 2-0, ready to speak its thunderous language. The concrete coffin would claim more victims before this was over. Marcus was determined not to be one of them.